Howdy everyone, I hope you're doing well. This is going to be a new multi-part series where we're going to focus on a photo montage. And in this particular video, we're going to replace the background or the sky that's in the background. So let's go take a look. All right, and in this episode, we're going to take this product and turn it into something that looks like this. All right, we're already in the editor module and we have a photo ready to go where we're going to change the background. The first thing we got to do is duplicate the original layer. And that way, so that we still have the original image and we can go back to it at any time. Let's name the new layer background. And then under selection tools, let's choose the magic wand. Magic Wand selects an area similar in color to the area that we have selected, and it's the perfect tool for isolating and selecting out the sky. We can also open the Magic Wand using the keyboard shortcut W. Now, the tolerance slider here affects what the wand thinks should be selected or how similar the surroundings are. So in our case, the sky. And let's set it right at 50 because if it was less, then only the dark part of the sky would be selected like this. And on the other hand, if we kept the tolerance a lot higher, then this part of the monastery right here, that's actually similar in color to the sky, would also be selected, which would look like this. Therefore, 50 right in the middle is just about right for this particular situation. All right, so pressing the Shift key switches to the Add to Selection mode, and we can add the missing parts. Now we can't forget to add the areas inside the windows as well. Here we can see that my magic wand has selected a piece of the monastery. So let's switch off the selection brush and fine tune our selection. To better see the areas that we have selected and to be sure we're not missing any of those pieces, let's choose the selection display here at the top and select selection only on black. And make sure we unclick show selection outline. Since we want to see the black background and not the monastery, click invert selection, which selects the exact opposite of what we've selected now. Notice we can clearly see which parts still need to be adjusted. Here in the windows and along the outer walls of the church, we can see a white border that we still need to remove. So select the magic wand once again. Now increase the blur slightly since we want the selection of the window to be subtle, and choose remove from selection. Notice a tolerance of 50 is a little bit, it's just not enough in this situation. Let's increase that to 70. And right away, the selection of the window is a lot better. Now select all the windows in the exact same way. In this window, there's a little bit of a sort of a white leftover. So let's switch to the selection brush so we can isolate it much more precisely. All right, so there's still a white border along part of the wall. So let's use the magic wand once again, and this time lower the tolerance to 40 so we don't select the right part of the monastery. Remove the remaining white parts using the selection brush. Notice we still have a little piece of sky in the window, so let's use the brush to remove it too. On the left side of the photo, there's still a piece of the building which we'll also want to remove. Okay, and now we've isolated the sky. Now right click on the background layer and click mask, and then add selection to mask. Also unclick selection display. Next, paste from file an image of a different sky and move it to where we need it. But first, some advice. It's a good idea to rename each layer because as we add layers and there's multiple layers, we can easily get lost. So it's better to define them so it's easy to select them or work in the layer that you need to at a particular time. All right, let's move the layer that's below the layer with the background so that the sky appears behind the monastery. Next, let's fix the grass so it fits in better with the night scene. Duplicate the original layer and move it to the top, and don't forget to rename it. All right, now don't worry that the new sky has disappeared. It will reappear as soon as we finish the next step. And once again, enable the Show Selection Outline function. Next, choose the Selection Brush tool. We can select it using Shift-Q, click Add to Selection, and use Shift to increase the brush diameter and select the grass. Now, it doesn't matter if the grass is not selected in exact detail, and we'll tune it out using the Refine Selection tool. Then let's increase the radius in Refine Selection. And now we can see that increasing the radius effect and to what detail the grass blades along the monastery are selected. Right-click the grass layer, select Mask, and then add selection to Mask. Now we can see the background is back as well. Since we want to give the impression of a night scene, we need to darken the grass a bit and lower its contrast, as well as muting the bold colors because colors are going to be a lot more subdued at twilight. Right-click the layer and select Add Layer and Exposure. Since we only want to make adjustments to the grass, drag and drop this layer to this icon with the eye. And by doing that, we'll link it to this layer, and the exposure will only be adjusted in the selected layer. Now lower the exposure as well as contrast. So the grass is still very bright, so to lower the brightness, add a color layer in the same way. And then let's lower the saturation. Okay, so the monastery can still use a bit of adjusting because it's just still a bit too bright. We still have to create a mask for the monastery. Unfortunately, we don't have to do it with the whole selection again because the monastery is already included in the selection with the background. So duplicate by background layer with its mask and rename it. But because the mask also includes the grass, we're gonna need to remove the grass part from the mask. Press Ctrl and click the mask named Grass. This way, the mask with grass is selected. Next, right-click the new monastery layer and select Mask, and then remove selection from Mask. The selected grass area is now going to be removed from the mask, and we're left with just the monastery. Since we'll be doing some more editing, let's create a group and call it Monastery. And creating a group is useful because we're going to be doing a lot more adjustments, and we want to keep them all organized. We also want this group between the layers to be at the very top. First, drag the layer with the monastery to the group and then move the entire group up. Notice that when we move the group layer above an adjustment layer, a white line appears that goes just over the layer list, but not all the way to the edge. This means that if we move the group right here, it will be included in the list of adjustments of the previous layer. But if we move it above a normal layer, the white line goes all the way to the edge. This means that we're moving the group directly above the layer and its adjustments, like this. Now back to editing. Thanks to the mask, we can fine-tune the selection of the monastery in greater detail. Click the mask, use the B key to select the brush, and use white to fill in the parts of the walls that weren't included in our selection. Now, just like with the grass, we're going to need to adjust the color and the brightness of the monastery because it doesn't seem to really fit in the night scene just as it is. So right-click on the monastery layer and select Add Layer and then Color. Again, let's link that layer with the layer that we're editing. lower saturation as well as vibrance. And now paint the monastery so it blends in more with the sky. Let's add a color layer and choose a shade of dark purple gray, which matches the shades in the background. Make sure the adjustment layers are linked to the list with the right layer. Now let's lower the opacity for the color layer. By clicking the eye next to the layer, we can see what the monastery looked like before adding the purple tint. And since the monastery still isn't too bright, let's add a new exposure layer. Now let's lower the exposure and increase the contrast. And let's also lower the white point. Okay, that looks much better, but there are still bright areas of the monastery that we need to deal with. So let's add one more exposure layer. In order to darken certain parts of the monastery, click Mask and Hide All. Now we chose Hide All because this will hide our adjusted exposure everywhere, and we will only reveal it in certain places using the brush. Now while using the white brush, let's paint over some of the lighter areas. Notice it looks like nothing happened, so we'll have to adjust the exposure. Now let's double click to open it and lower the exposure as well as contrast. Now you can see how this spot has darkened. It's good to have blur slightly increased here because if it's too low, for example 0, the brush strokes will be sharply defined, and that's something that we don't want. Now we can darken all of the bright parts. Okay, finally we're going to tweak the photo's overall exposure. So add an exposure layer, this time outside the group. And we're doing this because we want it to affect the entire image. Slightly increase all the values so the entire image isn't too dark. And that's it. It looks much better already. Now let's save the file as a .zps file because it's going to save all of our layers, and if we choose to rework this, we can return to it at any time. Go to Save As, choose a .zps as our file type, and then click Save. Okay, and that's it for me for this video. I hope it was something you found useful about replacing the sky or changing the background in your photograph. And for our next video, you can look forward to learning how to add objects to the video. So give us a like, hit subscribe if you haven't done already, or leave us a comment about any thoughts you might have about this video, maybe something that you've done yourself. And we look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, take care. I'll see you later. Bye.